Hey, what's up, students? Welcome to Group Week. I'm so excited to be jumping back into our Reset series. This is going to be the last week in our Reset series, and I hope it's been super helpful for you. I've loved kicking off 2018, just thinking about some of the things I want to be different in my life this year, maybe than they were last year. Quick shout out to Winter Weekend, some of the best days of the entire year. Thank you guys for coming out so strong, and just know we're all praying for you that God would continue to water all the seeds that He planted in your life up at Sharp Top Cove this past weekend. So it's been amazing. The title of the message today is Your Failure is Not Final. Your failure is not final. And so, I was thinking about week one, and one of the things we were asking everybody to think about is what's one thing you'd like to be different this year than last year? Or maybe is there a new dream or a new path or a new direction? Maybe you feel like God is leading you in the new year. And it's been the story in my life that I have had a few of those moments where I feel like, I'm going to go in this direction now. I feel like God's leading me to do this or to move this way. And what's happened is I kind of put one foot in front of the other for a little bit, and maybe I do good for a few weeks or I do good for a month, but then there's some kind of failure that creeps in. There's some mess up. There's some kind of hiccup in the plan. There's some screw up. There's something where I knew I shouldn't have done it, but then I did it anyways. And the enemy is always so quick to just swoop in on top of that and just accuse me of it and sideline me from the very dream that God had put in my heart at the beginning of the year. And so I don't know if you feel like that's happened to you or not, but what I do know is the enemy will just want you to replay it over and over and over again. And if he can use that rewind button in your brain to put you on the sidelines from doing anything great in the economy of God, I know that he's going to try to do that. And just thinking about all the students right now who are thinking, man, I want to do this year or this year, then the reality is we're in February and we're human, so there probably has been some kind of mess up or screw up that has already happened, but don't let it take you out because your failure is not final. So I want to look at one guy in Scripture. He's one of my favorite people in all of the Bible. His name is Peter, and we're going to jump in Mark chapter 1, verse 16 is going to be the first place that we see him. Jesus is kind of calling his first disciples, and this is what it says. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once, or some translations say immediately, they left their nets and followed him. Now, this is crazy for a lot of different reasons, but in the day, you would have done what your dad did. That's kind of the cultural norm. And he would have done what his dad did, and he would have done what his dad did. So for Peter, in a moment, when he meets Jesus, to leave everything he's ever known behind to go follow him, it really says something amazing about Jesus. But so he leaves everything that he's ever known and he starts following Jesus. He becomes one of Jesus's crew. Like, he's part of his squad. He's in the inner circle. He's getting to go through all the Gospels, all the amazing things that we see Jesus do. Peter's like in his corner for all of those things, which is unbelievable. This was kind of like Peter's week one in the Reset series. This is a new dream. This is a new path. This is a new goal. I'm going to leave what I've known behind and I'm going to chase after something new. And so later on in the Gospels, in Luke chapter 22, that we come to another interesting place where we see this same guy, Simon, who we know as Peter. And we know that in John chapter 1, Jesus changes his name to Cephas, which is translated as Peter. So we know it's the same guy. And we're going to pick him back up in Luke chapter 22. Jesus is having a meal with his disciples that we know is called the Last Supper. And at that meal, he says to his inner circle, he says, hey, one of you is going to betray me. One of you guys that's been around me for a long time, part of my crew, part of my inner circle, one of you is going to sell me out. And can you imagine what the guys must have felt in that room? They would be like, no, not me. I would never do that, Jesus. Never me, never me. Maybe that guy over there, maybe him over there, but it's never going to be me. And we see Peter pipes up and he says this. He says, Lord, I am ready to go to prison for you and to death. It's his way of saying, it is not going to be me. Whoever sells you out, I don't know who it is going to be, but I'm telling you, Jesus, it is not going to be me. I will go to prison and to death for you. But then if we just listen to what Jesus says in response to that. He says, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. And so Peter's like, no, I just told you that I would die for you. I just told you that I would go to jail for you. Why would I ever deny that I even know you? That doesn't even make sense. You got it wrong. You must be thinking of somebody else. I would never do that. And then if we just fast forward a little bit down into the same chapter, Luke chapter 22, the subtitle of this chapter is Peter Disowns Jesus. And so Jesus has been arrested by this point, and there's these people who would have been around when Jesus got arrested, and they're all around this campfire, and it says there's this girl there, and Peter's also there, and they're kind of sitting around this campfire, and the girl sees him, and she goes, hey, I've seen you before. You're one of Jesus's guys, aren't you? Aren't you part of his crew? I saw you kind of like running around with him. You're one of them, aren't you? Aren't you part of Jesus's crew? And Peter responds, listen to what he says. He says, woman, I don't know him. Can you imagine that? Like just earlier in the same chapter, Peter says to Jesus' face, he says, I will go to jail or I will die for you. And then in the same chapter, he goes, woman, I don't even know who it is that you're talking about. I don't even know who that guy is. And then there's another person that says a little bit later, it says, he sees Peter and he says, hey, you're also one of them, aren't you? It's his way of saying, hey, I've seen you before. You're part of Jesus' crew, aren't you? The guy who just got arrested, aren't you one of them? I think you're part of his crew, aren't you? And Peter responds, he says, man, I am not. And I love the language of the Bible. It's not outdated at all. It's the same thing you say and I say. When someone accuses us of something, you're like, no, man, I'm not. No, man, it wasn't me. No, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And Peter says, man, I'm not. I'm not part of his crew. I don't even know who that guy is. Crazy. And then there's a third time. It says about an hour later, someone else speaks up and they say, certainly this fellow was with him. It says, certainly you were with Jesus, for you are a Galilean. And Peter replied, man, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know what you're talking about. You're accusing me of being part of his crew? And that was the third time, the final straw. It says, then the rooster crows. And it says when the rooster crows that Peter and Jesus lock eyes. Can you imagine that moment? Just earlier, Jesus said, hey, I'm telling you, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny 3 times that you even know me. And Peter was like, no, I would never, ever, 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 ever do that. And then Peter does it, and the rooster crows, and he turns around, and Jesus is just looking right at him. Can you imagine the guilt and the shame that must have come on Peter in a second? Can you imagine? He must have thought to himself, I am such a royal mess up. I am such a failure. He even told me it was going to happen, and then I still did it. And it says, the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, and Peter remembered what the Lord had spoken to him before when he said, before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And then it says about Peter, it says, and he went outside and he wept bitterly. He just soaked up all the guilt and all the shame. And I think about when Jesus first called him, he's like, man, I got this new dream and this new plan for your life. And then he got out of the boat and he started following Jesus. And then I think about Peter being outside of this room, just sitting there weeping bitterly, thinking, I have messed everything up. There's no way I'm ever going to be used to do anything great again. I have royally messed up the plans that God had for my life. But the good news of this video and the good news of the gospel is this, that his failure wasn't final, and your failure is not final. So the last place we're going to look, it's about Peter again in John chapter 21. Jesus at this point has gone. He's given his life on the cross. He's been resurrected from the dead. And his disciples have seen him a few times, but he's never spoken directly to Peter. And so I just can imagine that Peter's still feeling all this guilt, all this shame. Like, man, if I ever really encounter Jesus in like a one-on-one moment again, I can't imagine how disappointed he is with me. And this is what it says in John chapter 21. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, and it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. You see, where was Peter the first moment Jesus called his name? He was in a fishing boat. And I don't know where you were when Jesus first called your name, but I know that you had to leave something behind in order to follow him. And I know this, I know that whenever the failure, whenever the mess up, whenever that thing that you wish you could take back happened, I know that there was a thought in your head, I should just go back to whatever I was doing before I ever even met this Jesus guy. And this is what Peter does. He says, man, I'm going fishing. I'm going back to what I knew in the beginning. And so Jesus is there and he's calling out on the shore to these guys who are in this fishing boat and they're not sure it's him. And then they do realize it's him. And I love it because it says, the first words Jesus speaks out to them, he says, friends, do you have any fish? Some translations say, children, do you have any fish? And if you're Peter, the last two words you think that Jesus is going to use to describe you are these, friends and child. But come on, his failure wasn't final. So just in this last section as we close, the subtitle we read when Peter denies Jesus is this. It says, Peter disowns Jesus. And the subtitle over this section in John chapter 21 is beautiful. It says, but Jesus reinstates Peter. And so this is what it says. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my lambs. And then Jesus asked him again, Simon, Peter, do you love me? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, well, then feed my sheep. And then it says, Jesus asked him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And it says in the scripture, Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. You're like, what's all that about? Well, when was the last time that Peter was asked the same question 3 times in a row? It's the moment where all the guilt and all the shame first started. It's Jesus' way of going, hey, remember when you were asked that other question 3 times? I don't want to make this big, general, broad statement. I want to get right into that moment. I want to get right into the night where the mess up happened. And by asking Peter this question 3 times, it was as if Jesus was saying, no, let's go right to the moment because I want you to know I see it. I have in full view what you did, and I want to speak right into that, and I want to let you know that your failure isn't final. And so the last 2 words of this text in John chapter 21 are beautiful. Jesus says to Peter, he says, follow me. The very same words he spoke to him when he found him in a fishing boat earlier. He said, come, follow me, Peter. And then Peter made a wreck out of his life. Peter denied the fact that he even knew who Jesus was. Peter had this grandiose plan of what he wanted to do in his life, and then it all shattered into a million pieces, and the weight and the guilt and the shame must have just crept in on him like 1,000 bricks on top of his shoulders. And then Jesus comes back in the very end and he says to him, he says, Peter, follow me. It's his way of saying, Peter, your failure isn't final. I know you've messed up, but I still have a plan for your life. And I'm going to invite you back into the very same journey I invited you into in the beginning. Even though you've messed up, come on, I have a plan for your life. Follow me. And so I don't know what your mess up has been, and I don't know what your failure has been, but I do know this. If you try to accomplish anything for the kingdom of God this far in 2018, there has been a mess up and there has been a screw up. There is something you wish you could take back, and the enemy is trying to use it to sideline you. And I think Jesus just wants to say to all of us today, keep going in the plans that I told you I had for your life. Don't let your mess up sideline you. Don't let yourself be tricked into thinking that your failure is final, because it isn't. And the same invitation I made to you in the beginning, I'm making to you again right now. Come, follow me. I have a great plan for your life. Your failure is not final. So let that free you into an amazing future for the rest of the year. Keep going for whatever it is that He's put in your heart. We love you. I love you. Hope you have an amazing time in group week. See you guys at the 5.